Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to tell you a bit about Ashwani before we get started. Ashwani is the Nissan Motor Company Representative Executive Officer and the company's COO. He started his career with Renault in 2006 and was instrumental in establishing Renault and Nissan companies in India. He was most recently a Mitsubishi Motors Corp Representative Executive Officer and the company's COO, responsible for all operational aspects of the Japanese automaker's global business. Prior to this, Gupta served as Alliance Senior Vice President of Renault Nissan Mitsubishi Light Commercial Vehicles. His roles across the three alliance partners has helped shape his global multidimensional perspective. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Gabby.
I thought we could start maybe by giving people a little bit of context or reference about Nissan's EVs. A lot of people might know Nissan as being a pioneer in EVs and doing the Leaf back in 2010. But can you talk a little bit about what you've got out on the market today, electric vehicles, especially here in the US, and maybe what's coming down the pike?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity today to be here. As you correctly said, Nissan launched Leaf in 2010 when markets didn't ask for it, regulations didn't ask for it, and customers didn't ask for it. We did it to drive the innovation, to enrich people's life. And when we talk about people's life, it's all about save the planet, save the human being, and connect the society. Since then, we were waiting that when the world will become aware of the advantages of the electrification. It took us 12, 13 years to make that awareness. And since then, we have launched two new battery electric vehicles. The second one, Aria, which has been launched in the United States in December 2022, and very well accepted by the customers. Now, moving forward, we plan to launch 27 electrified vehicles, out of which 19 will be fully battery electric vehicles by 2030. And recently, we have announced in United States we are investing $500 million in Canton, Mississippi facility to launch 4 battery electric cars. So the assumption which we have is by 2030, 55% of our lineup will be electrified. And when we look at United States, before IRA came in, we had a hypothesis of 40% electrified by 2030. But now as IRA has arrived, I think it will accelerate the things.
Okay. Well, since you brought up IRA, that's why we're all here. We're trying to figure this thing out, right? For the final rules come out later this week, hopefully. Tell us, I want to understand what it's like for you as an automaker. Do any of your, I know you have the Aria, which is a new EV that just came out. Does that qualify for a $7,500 consumer tax credit in the US? Does it get part of it? How do you stand now, and what are you expecting, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, Aria, first of all, is made in Japan, and it is exported all over the world, so it will not qualify for IRA. However, we believe that IRA is going to accelerate the electrification. Why? Because IRA is a very comprehensive, well thought of strategy, which is combining the climate initiative with the economical initiative, but also the customer aspirations. And all these three put together are going to accelerate the electrification. Hence, we want to use IRA as the enabler to accelerate the electrification for climate, for economy, and for the customers.
What do you expect your supply chain, how is your supply chain going to change here in the United States once we have these final rules? I mean, I know we don't have the final ones yet, but how is this bill going to change the way your company builds EVs?
Look, I mean, when Nissan entered the United States 40 years before, our policy is local for local, which means investment has to be done close to the customer. Since 40 years, we have invested more than $14 billion in the United States. And we have the full value chain here, from advanced research in Silicon Valley to engineering center in Detroit to testing facility in Arizona, then our 2 plants and the design center. Now, with these investments which we have done in United States. Now moving forward, what we have learned for sure in last 40 years is supply chain is one of the most critical component in the business case, which drives the competitiveness. And then what we have seen in pandemic and we have seen in the supply chain crisis, especially the semiconductors, we do believe that we have to address the supply chain end to end, in addition to when we talk about manufacturing and assembling the cars. And when we look at IRA, IRA talks about producing the cars, but also sourcing the raw material. That's why it gives us an opportunity to look at our whole supply chain.
Are there certain things you're waiting to see come out on the IRA? In other words, are there maybe certain investments or supply chain decisions that you are maybe considering, but you're waiting to see what the fine print is on these rules? Is it going to make that much of a difference for you?
Look, we started electrification in 2010, and the first battery electric we made in 2013. And as I said, we never waited for any kind of regulations to come in. At first, you know, we are welcoming IRA because it's going to accelerate the electrification. Second, this morning, Japan has been included in the sourcing of critical minerals as aligned country, which means this is the next step in terms of securing the supply chain. But I would go much beyond securing the supply chain. It's all about innovation. When we talk about critical raw materials, all about innovation, and this opportunity will give Japan and United States to have the innovation hub in the future. For example, we decided as Nissan to invest in the all-solid-state battery by ourselves. We did that before in 2010 also. So when we are doing the development, advanced research of all-solid-state battery, we are taking care of all the critical materials, right? United States is one of the most important business for Nissan. So when we are doing the development in Japan, our US operations have to be integrated into it so that when we are industrializing those critical raw materials, including linked to the all-solid-state battery, we have the maximum economy of scale. So that's why I think this morning the agreement on including Japan is a great news for us, for US operations as well as for Japanese operations.
Do you think that deal can help with the affordability of electric vehicles?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, whenever we talk about local for local, we always talk about investments done to improve the competitiveness of the localization. And I think this is why, as I said before, the beauty of IRA is it's the best combination to address climate needs, economical needs, and the customer needs. And that will help customer to have the affordable battery electric cars. At the end, you know, electrification should not be the objective. Electrification should be the consequence of the natural choice of the customer. Then why customers should go for electric vehicles? Number one, it should have a better driving performance. Number two, the total cost of ownership should be better than the ICE. And number three, it's good for climate. So I think our job is how we make all these things competitive so that customer says, look, I'm going to go for battery electric car. And that's a tipping point.
There's in the auto industry, one thing that people watch very closely is when we're going to reach parity with gas combustion engines. And so I guess my question is, one, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but when do you think we might get there? And what is Nissan's plan to kind of navigate that shift? Because everyone, I think other automakers here have said, you know, our gas guzzling trucks, that's what fuels our EV investments, and we need that cash flow to, you know, bring this technology and commercialize it. So based on what you look at today, what do you think where is that parity point, and how are you preparing for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. As you correctly said, Gabby, that nobody has the crystal ball. But even then, when we talk about 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line, we need to have some kind of hypothesis. As I said before, just 6 months before we said that we will have 50% electrified cars by 2030, but now we revise it to 55%. Now, after IRA, we may revise it further. One thing is very clear, when it comes to the driving performance, the electric cars are better than ICE in many aspects, right? Then the second thing which is challenging today is the total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership is, of course, driven by the entry price. And I would say the tipping point depends on two things. Number one is the entry price, and where the administrations, the governments are helping the customers with the customer-facing incentives to bridge the gap. But for me, this is short term. This should be only for the transition, because at the end, the industrialization of battery electric car should be competitive, because it is all about economy of scale. So while the customer is getting the customer incentives and the market of electrification is growing, the volumes are growing, and the industrialization becomes more competitive. So which means the support from the administration to the customer to bring down the retail price, but also to the manufacturers to have a competitive industrialization, that should work. And after some time, customer incentives may not be needed, because the industrialization of battery electric cars will be highly competitive. And if we look at, for example, let's look at Europe. When we look at Europe, Europe started this initiative back in 2010. Even after 12 to 13 years, the Europe is like 18% of the automotive market is battery electric. And how Europe has managed it, on one side, with the stringent regulations, Euro 5, Euro 6, Euro 7, the cost of the ICE cars goes up. On the other side, with the incentives, with the breakthrough technologies by the manufacturers, the cost of manufacturing comes down. So then the tipping point is coming at its end. I think United States will definitely go through it, maybe much faster because of IRA. That's what is our hypothesis.
Mm-hmm. So in that hypothesis, it really does posit that these IRA consumer benefits are going to flow through and subsidize the EVs for some time. So yeah. You're betting on you're going to qualify for this stuff. Yeah. Your cars are going to qualify.
Yeah. I mean, we are betting for the customer incentives, mainly for customers, mm-hmm. and this is how the market will shift. Mm-hmm. But we are also betting on the heavy investments in the breakthrough technologies to make the battery electric cars much more competitive. And I think we have to see it both ways. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. So solid state is kind of like the holy grail in the battery world that everyone's looking to hopefully have some breakthrough. So let's think about, in the meantime, I think, covering, since the IRA kind of shocked everybody when Manchin helped pass it last August, and there's been really intense sort of lobbying and debate around, especially the 30D, these content provisions that Senator Manchin put in there. And I know there are a lot of really important kind of policy goals baked into that. It's accelerating electrification, like you talked about. It's also building up or kind of rebuilding U.S. manufacturing base, mm-hmm. and also kind of reducing U.S. dependence on China. Now, I think we know that one of the stickiest, most just hotly debated provisions is sort of giving the auto industry enough room, whether it's time or doing those very wonky calculations to make sure that that this change is not going to happen overnight. So I guess my question is, how do you ensure, this is a tough question, but so how do you ensure that the automakers have the runway they need to make this transition and keep these vehicles, make EVs affordable, while not crowding out if like we have this Japan deal, and if the rules come out like we think they're going to come out on Friday, now companies in Korea or Japan can supply a cathode, straight from Japan or Korea and still qualify for those credits. So, and I'm sure that's great for the automakers because everybody, we've got high interest rates, commodity prices have gone up. The auto industry is struggling to make EVs more affordable for people. But there's another goal here, which is, trying to bring up domestic cathode makers. So very long introduction, a way of asking, is Nissan going to do business with local? I mean, if you've already got these global incumbents that are providing these battery components to you that you've been working with for years, Do you still see yourself kind of diversifying and also doing business with domestic U.S. producers as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what we as Nissan want to do when it comes to the battery electric is to control the whole supply chain by ourselves. And we call it vertical integration. In the vertical integration, we have 4 components. The first is the platform of the car, which we do it ourselves. The second is the electric powertrain, which we do it ourselves. The third is the battery, and the fourth is the upper body. So upper body with electronic architecture, battery, e-powertrain, the platform, we want to do it by ourselves. That's why we decided to invest in the all-solid-state battery. Now, can we do it everything by ourselves, or we should select the things where we are good at? In that case, we call it horizontal collaboration, which means we are getting into the partnership to have that support for us. At the end, our goal is to achieve the competitiveness. When it comes to United States, these 4 things we will do in United States. We have platform, we have battery plant, we have e-powertrain plant, which we are going to transform our current ICE powertrain plant in Tennessee, and we have upper body. Then horizontally, definitely we will need the minerals, we will need the supply chain, and this is where we need the partnership. And as we said this morning, the agreement with Japan has really broadened up our horizon of having access to the supply chain and make them more competitive. And this is not only Japan, but how US and Japan can work together to develop that supply chain to have a sufficient economy of scale. And that's why the United States, for us, will become one of the global innovation hub for Nissan, because then we have to not only talk about design and development of cars, we have to talk about development of the critical minerals.
So, okay. Well, and I think you kind of made an interesting strategy point there about batteries, which is another question I think about a lot these days. You've got examples like, Tesla, which is doing vertical integration. They're trying to make their own batteries. Volkswagen is trying to do that. Nissan's interesting because you were this pioneer. You did a joint venture for a battery company way before all these other guys did, but you ended up selling it. But now you still have a stake in it. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is that, do you feel like if you can achieve a breakthrough on solid-state batteries, would that be your way of kind of bringing batteries back into that stack of something that Nissan as an automaker really owns?
Yeah. For the all-solid-state battery, this is going to be our unique competitiveness, as we used to have the lithium-ion battery in 2010. And this is for sure we want to do it by ourselves. Having said that, we have the strategic partnership with the battery makers, where we exchange and we develop the technologies together. So still, the technologies which are in our car, especially for the batteries, a lot of it is driven by Nissan.
Okay. So there's still the very collaboration between you and your battery suppliers today too. Okay. Another thing I want to touch on. Oh, we're almost done. So I can't finish without asking this question, since we're sitting here talking about critical minerals in the supply chain. I think one thing that SAFE has really emphasized here is the way that the U.S., when we think about this geopolitical conflict with China, the way the U.S. can kind of regain its footing is to create a supply chain that has higher labor and environmental standards. Now, without question, that's going to be more of a pain in the ass for the car companies, right? It's going to be, maybe, I don't know if it's more paperwork, it's more cost. Is that something that Nissan is like ready to take on? Is that part of your business model to do that? I don't know. I mean, I've never ran a battery supply chain, so I don't know exactly what it entails, but everyone here at this conference is kind of looking for a new level of transparency than what we have with the very China-heavy supply chain today. So is that a realistic ask for Nissan and for the auto industry?
Yeah, I mean, the digital transformation which we have led in our company, especially after pandemic, is also helping us in identifying the full supply chain. And environment, economy is important, but ethics in having the supply chain is the most important thing which we have to take care. So that's why this DX in the supply chain is helping us in controlling end-to-end supply chain.
Okay, so I mean, so it sounds like you're kind of already on track for that. Like there were a lot of painful lessons about the supply chain during the pandemic for the auto industry and many industries with chips. And so you're saying sort of like this digital infrastructure to be able to do that is already that's already happening?
It started happening, yeah.
It started?
Yeah.
And, another thing, again, because I'm a reporter and I spend way too much time looking at Twitter and social media, in the United States, when we think about consumer adoption in EVs, there's a lot of people who say, well, EVs are, just as dirty, or look at this mining, and, they'll talk about, there are legitimately terrible labor violations and environmental destruction going on to kind of, get the minerals out that we need for EVs. I think one of the ideas that SAFE was talking about was almost creating like a Moroni sticker. Like when you put it on the car, it could almost like certify that this battery, nobody was harmed in the production of this battery. I don't know. Do you think that would be appealing to? Would you ever put that on a car? Like, do you think there would be like you could gain market share or consumer trust that way? Or
yeah, I mean, putting up a sticker is, it could be a great option. In our view, what we need to do is make sure through cross-industrial collaboration and cross-administrative collaboration that we make an open ecosystem which is transparent, secured to do that, right? I mean, we can appeal, right? We can appeal, that's fine. But I think what we have to do for sure is to make sure that what we are appealing is ensured. And I think this is something which we can do always by having a cross-industrial collaboration with the administration.
Okay, and it feels like that's happening now. You
Yeah.
feel like those things are happening.
Sure.
Okay, I think we're out of time. The clock is saying a lot of different numbers, but I think we're good. Guys, has it been 20 minutes? I don't know. Well, I can keep going if we need a little more time. I have plenty of questions for you, but let me just look at. No, okay, we're done. Okay, well, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ashwani, for doing this. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.